Today I'm reading another rational recovery book called The Art of AVRT by Jack Trimpey. If you don't know what rational recovery and AVRT are, it's an alternative approach to addiction that's completely different from AA. And in his book that we're reading tonight, he kind of assumes that you know what those terms mean. So if you don't know what they mean, click in the description, and I've got a Virginia story link there, and it'll make it a lot clearer. And today I just wanted to give you a little warning that he is going to talk about evolution a bit, but don't let that turn you off. There's a lot that can be gleaned from that, even if you're a creationist. But I know a lot of people who are into rational recovery are atheists, so you probably might not have a problem with it at all. So let me get into it here. This is called the AVRT paradigm, and it starts on page 37. In the Art of AVRT, paradigm means a way of looking at addiction in a simple, larger context. I have drawn from a number of sources tracing the origins of human consciousness based upon anthropological studies in light of the current neuroscience. The result is a refreshing view of human history that avoids much of the rote historicism in academia. Not dogma, but a fascinating and fun way of looking at the emergence of Homo sapiens as the only conscious species. Let's briefly look at some basic features of our existence, so that later we can build on the simple paradigm of AVRT. Obviously, Homo sapiens has not always possessed consciousness, as you and I are conscious, but for eons functioned as other animals did, guided by survival appetites and intuitions. Our beastly ancestors awakened quite recently as conscious human beings, only about 3,000 to 5,000 years ago. But it wasn't the result of caveman support groups or the outcome of treatment of cavemanism. Prehistoric man was certainly more intelligent than the rest, allowing advancements such as tool making and fire tending. But they were not like us, in that they did not think as we do, nor did they make decisions by consciously weighing alternatives against each other. Indeed, they had no conscious minds, as we do, in which to consciously consider alternatives. They were intelligent as compared to other animals and beasts, but they were quite aware, alert, and vigilant each day. However, they did not possess the ocean of mental consciousness that distinguishes the mind of modern man from the mind of ancient man. The first appearances of ancient writing, about 7,000 to 8,000 years ago, shows that in their transition to becoming human beings, Homo sapiens were preoccupied with worshiping gods. And in fact, they seemed to think of little else. They continued with decreasing fervor into Greece and Rome, both notable God-controlled civilizations, and may be seen today in religions which attempt to establish conscious contact with gods. Until the end of the Stone Age, about 10,000 years ago, ancient man was a nomadic hunter-gatherer following survival appetites for food, sex, safety, and shelter. Those animal appetites spoke to him in thoughts as vivid internal voices that commanded him to do what he must do, and where and when to do it, in order to survive. Because the hemispheres of the brain did not communicate with each other as they do these days, appetite-driven ancient man, Adam, experienced his mental survival commands as coming from outside of himself, as gods, which urged and spoke to him, demanding exact obedience under penalty of death. Because those mental voices were directed toward his survival, they carried great authority. He therefore considered them to be the voices of powerful beings who ruled the world and controlled the central aspects of his survival: hunting, war, breeding, and the physical environment, including the sea, fire, winds, and forest. Driven by inner commands he experienced as coming from external gods, he was powerless to disobey. Prehistoric man was without free will. All was well during the Stone Age in that Homo sapiens adapted and survived through nomadic hunting and gathering lifestyles, moving on as seasons or scarcities dictated. Then came a revolution more significant than the Industrial Revolution, when ancient man learned principles of agriculture and animal husbandry. The Neolithic Revolution, as it's called, brought radical changes including excess food, villages and settlements, trade, and of course tribal conflict and war. Human consciousness was born of necessity when our ancestors' God voices failed to ensure survival in a hostile, increasingly complex environment. Finally, as survival became more precarious, our prehistoric ancestors faced a terrible dilemma: to obey the God voices and probably die, or to willfully disobey the gods and fend for themselves. In a sense, this was the first actual decision made by our long-dead ancestral parents, and we should be glad, I think, that they chose to disobey the God voices in their head and think for themselves. The break of Homo sapiens from the realm of God control to self-direction was certainly the most significant event in world history, quite possibly in the universe itself. Facing certain death, Homo sapiens was forced to wake up and disobey the intuitive God voices and choose paths preserving life. It was a tortured decision for them, fraught with fear of the unknown, tempting the wrath of gods themselves. In breaking from the God control of the past, the ancient man became conscious, at long last aware of his mind's eye, of himself as a unique individual. I. The DNA of Homo sapiens has not changed to accommodate human civilization. Homo sapiens has remained a species of nomadic beasts, factory set for a predatory existence in the wild, but trying to adapt to the rules and laws necessary for survival in a sedentary human civilization. We are all astride a brute animal being as we go about our daily business. However, ancient man did not have a body as we do. He was his body, and it moved about of its own accord without subjective planning or deliberation. The ancients just did what came naturally. Ancient man did not believe in gods, but he experienced gods as mental voices all day long, and he curried their favor however he could, through prayer, ritual, or sacrifice. Thus came mythology and religion. It was not easy for appetite-driven ancient man, Adam, to defy the gods which carried such immense authority and seemed to be his only chance of survival. They were God-fearing in the most basic way possible, literally fearing divine retaliation for disobedience, unable to imagine a satisfactory life without the comfort of the omniscient, the omnipotent gods that promised safety and security in exchange for blind obedience. With the dawn of consciousness came a sense of nostalgia for the omnipotent gods that sheltered ancient man from uncertainty of directing his own behavior. The curse of free will. Indeed, the miracle of consciousness did not bring human happiness, because it seemed to ancient man that the gods had fallen silent as punishment for disobedience. History records that the earliest humans felt abandoned, ashamed, and fearful that the gods were punishing them through disasters such as famine, disease, and natural cataclysms. As his intellectual advantages increased and his consciousness remained wedded to his animal nature, religions came into being for the purpose of restoring communion with the gods and gaining their favor. Out of that social experience, in the context of the great dramas of ancient history, came the reversal of the law of the jungle, resulting in a culture of beliefs and values that support the larger human family which comprises human civilization. Finally, as he made his choice and broke free from his physical self, he became a human consciousness, a subjective self-identity, a free soul able to navigate the far horizons of his newfound oceanic consciousness. A human being who had matured beyond the parental presence of nature. Thus, by recognizing and defying their animal voice, AV, our ancestors gradually separated from their physical beings and became conscious, self-directed individuals capable of moral reasoning and possessing free will, the miraculous ability to act independently of one's bodily commands and desires. Very significantly, prehistoric man was without perception of time, just as Lassie the dog cannot reminisce about her puppyhood nor plan her retirement. Their ancestry and history were experienced as mythology, and they had no concept of posterity. Therefore, even after the development of language and writing, there was no forward-looking concern for anyone different from them, particularly for modern man. That is why there is such a desperate need for the AVRT paradigm, which honors our primitive ancestors, including the religious leaders who, for centuries, built a wall of separation between the human family and the barbarians at the gate, a wall which must first stand firm within the human consciousness, and then in the realm of human civilizations and the rule of law. Although much of human history has been a struggle to adapt to a world that no longer speaks directly to us as it once did, the fate of humanity remains unknown. Our consciousness is the true center of our lives, even when we are fully engaged in life's many challenges and joys. AVRT-based recovery may therefore be seen as a reenactment of the triumphant rise of conscience, modern man from his barbarian ancestors, and it's so easy that a caveman can do it. Just as they became human by recognizing their own erroneous animal voice, AV, you can become human once again by recognizing your addictive voice, AV. The language of DNA carries deep nostalgia for our original feral state, our yearning for a world ordered by benevolent gods to provide for our most basic needs, in a world in which our love and loyalty is spent on rituals of adulation, subordination, and obedience. In the inverted realm of human consciousness, our love and loyalty is better spent on the human family, which is the building block of civilization and nations. The addictive voice, which is the sole cause of your addiction, stems from the same animal voice that occupied your crouching ancestors, carrying the same authority that drove them to despair, causing them needless suffering and death until it finally gave way to the miracle of human consciousness. You are a party animal, an appetite-driven, addicted man, Adam, struggling against an addictive voice with an eerie ability to override your better judgment and then lord it over you. Now you will evict that rogue mentality and reclaim your original family identity, where the law of the jungle was inverted in the interest of your survival, success, and happiness in human civilization. The religious part. Relax, there isn't any religion in the art of AVRT. There can't be, because you are currently incapable of making sound decisions, pro or con, about God, religion, salvation, or anything having to do with those matters. Religions themselves often advise you to hold off on salvation until you've straightened out, pointing out that you cannot stagger into heaven. Besides, you resent religion in the first place, and if you ever did believe in God, then you've certainly had quite a falling out with him since then. Very likely your quills are bristling right now, a reaction to the mention of religion and God. I would even guess you felt a little squirmy at the direct reference to Adam above. Yes, the same Adam as the internal domain of the endless now, Eden. Oops, there I go again, offending your beast, just for the hell of it, poor thing. The truth is, however, none of the world's great religions endorse powerlessness over bodily desires. On the contrary, all of them warn of this predicament and inspire self-restraint, recognition of evil, and self-restraint. They acknowledge man's free will, a miracle they attribute to a creator. AVRT-based recovery results in the piercing insight that there are two versions of Homo sapiens, the original animal version and the human version, and that the world itself, all nations, all families, all organizations, is divided into two opposing camps. Because the addictive voice is simply a supercharged version of the animal voice, AVRT endows you with the ability to see human history, current events, and social behavior from a new viewing point, with new clarity and understanding. This is a watershed insight, the discovery of the dividing principle which creates the endless conflict and dramas of history, as though family-centered. Human civilization is struggling to survive on the planet of the apes. I have conducted AVRT classes in which firm atheists and devout Christians sat side by side for several days, often engaging in intense discussion and interactions, but without ever becoming aware of their underlying opposite beliefs on God and religion. The principles of AVRT are truly universal when freely chosen, and nothing of value comes from forcing one view over another when approaching the urgent conditions of addiction. Moreover, AVRT takes the best of both atheism and religion to form a vital platform for the mind of modern man, which is a dramatically different, not better, a subjective opinion, but different from the minds of those who wrote the Judeo-Christian scriptures. AVRT will return you to your native beliefs and original family values, and when you emerge on the other side of addiction fully recovered, you'll face the same riddles and questions we all do. Then, over the years to come, you'll have a wonderful opportunity to examine philosophical and religious questions as a human being and come up with your own emerging belief system. In AVRT-based recovery, you have a means to examine ultimate questions at the appropriate time without the immediate threat of personal extinction hanging over your head. Okay, that's the first section from the Art of AVRT. I'll be doing a series of readings related to out of this book, and I hope you'll join me for more AVRT content. Thank you.